Good morning and welcome to the show. Thanks for waking up with us. This morning I've got JT, or James Thompson. He's a nutritionist at Nation's Best Family Healthcare, and we're going to talk a little bit about obesity today. It's a big problem, isn't it, JT?
It's a big problem and growing, no pun intended.
Yeah, obesity is growing, a growing problem. Yeah,
it gets worse every year, and from say the 60s and 70s to 80s, it was increasing by incremental amounts of 5 to 10%, and from early 2000 to 2006, 2007, it quadrupled, and then it's done it again. So we're looking at about close to 40% are morbidly obese.
What are we doing wrong?
It's
increasing.
A combination of diet and exercise.
Is it?
Yeah.
So we're just getting lazier and
it's
more gluttonous?
Yeah. The sugar and the saturated fat is doing a considerable amount of it. They're two things that we don't need. You know, the saturated fat serves no purpose, and the sugar really doesn't either.
Wow. And I drink a lot of coffee, and I take sugar in it. So you're telling me that the sugar is not doing any benefit for me, really? Maybe gives me a quick energy boost, especially in the morning. I know you people out there are drinking coffee with sugar in it.
A lot do. And I would urge you to go toward, Splenda or Truvia or Stevia or one of those, contrary to the scares that are out there. It doesn't cause cancer.
Oh, geez, yeah. And that's the other thing. You're darn if you do and damn if you don't. And, what do you put in your coffee, or should you just give it up at all? I mean, if you want to have any quality of life, you want to eat tasty food. You want to feel satisfied after you're eating. After you eat, do you have to be do you have to live like a monk? Do you have to, be on a starvation diet? Got to become a vegetarian? I mean, what does it take?
I think that's probably one of the biggest misconceptions that people have in their head. The term diet has been used and abused so much that diet doesn't mean what we eat anymore. Diet is misery and pills and
special regimen.
Yes. Eating clean, that we've talked about before when I was here.
And just for people who may have missed that, what is eating clean?
Eating clean, in my opinion, is void of sugar and saturated fat. You can start to watch your salt if your blood pressure is high, and you can start to come down the list. But if there were two big things that you did, it would be to eliminate sugar and saturated fat. Of course, increasing your water, and we can continue down the list. But the use of sugar and saturated fat is really pointless. I mean, your body it has no use for the human body at all.
Really, sugar at all?
Sugar at all. It will use it, but it doesn't need it.
Now, there are different types of sugars, too. Are there good sugars and bad sugars? Or
there are sugars that don't elicit as bad of a response, such as fructose, as do some of the others. But at the end of the day, no. Sugar. Your body doesn't care. It will store it all the same. It will use it all the same. And it will all become body fat if it's used in excess.
And salt, that's another thing that's really hard to avoid. I mean, salt is in everything.
And sugar is, too.
Yeah, I guess it is, especially in prepared foods or processed foods.
It's what makes things taste good.
Yeah.
Sugar and saturated fat make things taste good. And
I saw a thing on National Geographic with these little snow monkeys were eating these potatoes, and they would take these potatoes and they dip them in the salt water as seasoning. So even little monkeys like tasty potatoes. I mean, they like their salt.
And we need it. Yeah. We need,
a certain amount of it.
We do. We need a certain amount of that, but we don't need a certain amount of sugar, and we don't need a certain amount of saturated fat. Those two things could be eliminated from the planet tomorrow, and we'd all be so much better off.
Wow.
Your body, the little bit of saturated fat or cholesterol that your body uses, the bad stuff, the lousy or the LDL,
right.
Your body actually manufactures that small amount that it uses, and it's for cellular function and some different things, but it manufactures a small amount it needs. Ingesting any saturated fat is pointless and dangerous.
Really? Wow, that's amazing. So there's the LDLs and the HDLs, and the way that was explained to me was that this happy and lousy.
That's a good way to remember it. People get them confused all the time, but the happy or the high density lipoproteins are smaller fragments. Almost think about it as for all the hunters and everyone out there, buckshot. It's little small pieces that break up the lousy or the low density lipoproteins and keep that stuff broken up. You get oil and water doesn't mix. Your blood is water based. The grease or oil or cholesterol has to move through your bloodstream. So,
well, JT, we got to run off to the local weather, but let's talk about what people can do at home to eat a little healthier.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And if you want to take it to the next level, maybe how they can get in touch with you and
sure.
how you could design a diet.
You got it.
Yeah, thanks for waking up with us. You're watching Waking Up with Don. And now off to your local weather, brought to you by the West Pittman Law Firm. westpittmanlawfirm.com. Welcome back to the show. I'm speaking with JT from Nation's Family Healthcare, Nation's Best, actually. And you're a colleague of Dr. Nation's up here in Lynn Haven, and you are the nutritionist, the in-house nutritionist there.
Right.
Now, we were talking about all the bad things about salt and sugar and how you should try to cut that out of your diet. What can people do? I mean,
start to look at labels would be the first thing that I'd tell people to do. I think the biggest misunderstanding that everyone has that I talk to is what's a protein, what's a carb, and what's a fat. You know, peanut butter and beans are probably the two biggest that I get coined as protein and that most people would call protein, and they're not. Peanut butter would be considered a fat, and beans are certainly considered a carbohydrate. Just because it has a little bit of protein in it doesn't make it a protein.
You know, see, you just, you know.
And it's everybody.
I thought beans were protein. I thought that, that's pure protein.
Beans have protein, but now we're starting to get into a plant-based protein versus an animal-based protein. And when you're talking about lean muscle mass, nitrogen balance, and all the things that are required in order for your body to burn body fat and use, body fat for energy instead of glycogen or burn muscle or whatnot, sugar's got to be very limited. I mean, we don't need it. Complex carbohydrates, eventually you're going to turn to sugar either way.
But where do you get your protein from without consuming a lot of fat? Are we talking like chicken, fish, and no red meat? Or
no,
can you have red meat? Or?
The red meat's fine. And I say fine in moderation. It does, we're talking about saturated fat. And if we take sugar and saturated fat and we were to be just very curt and put them in two categories, sugar is going to make you obese. Saturated fat's going to kill you. That's going to be the heart disease. You can get away with eating more saturated fat and still be lower in body fat or leaner or smaller, but be unhealthy on the inside. So
moderation, is that what I'm hearing? Moderation with the red meat?
Everything.
I mean, so what's your main source of protein?
Chicken, turkey, tuna, steak, lean ground beef, filet, whitefish, salmon, grouper, orange roughy, tilapia, cottage cheese, Greek yogurt, protein bars, whey protein shakes. I mean,
Greek yogurt. That's surprising. My wife is big on that.
Greek yogurt.
Yeah. Well, so you could actually, from that list of proteins, you got 3 meals a day, right there, without having a cheeseburger.
That's right.
I mean, but you can still have an occasional cheeseburger.
It doesn't, and again, in moderation, it doesn't hurt you. I'm not going to tell you that I don't ever do it, or don't ever have pizza or the key lime pie that I love and the things like that. Eating clean doesn't mean that you should live the rest of your life in a place where you don't taste sugar or have anything, at the family reunion or Thanksgiving or Christmas or the cookies that grandma sends and things like that. I mean, nobody wants to live like that. I mean, the folks that do that are the athletes that I work with, the Olympic athletes, the pro bodybuilders, figure fitness competitors, the folks that have a paycheck or a trophy on the line.
Yeah.
And they do it because of that, not because they want to.
I see. JT, is everybody the same, or do different people have different capacities to absorb sugars and fats and cholesterol and stuff?
Good question. And
do we all have the
different.
same baseline or not?
No, absolutely not. I mean, we could look at the statistics of obesity in the United States, for instance, and we're up to pretty close to 40%. That's based on height-weight ratios, and according to height-weight ratios, I'd be morbidly obese at 5'9", 230, regardless of what my waist size is or my body fat is.
Yeah.
It's just a number.
Because nobody would look at you and say, "Oh, here comes an obese guy." I mean,
no,
right? I mean,
no. But if I was 23 years old at my exact stats, I couldn't get in the military.
Yeah, isn't that something?
Yeah.
Because of the height, weight.
Life insurance was very difficult to get.
So what's the measurement then? That's just a rule of thumb. That
body fat.
Body fat. So you got to do like a body fat index type deal.
If you wanted to check body fat, you can. Rarely do I actually pinch and do skin fold measurements and take body fat. You can look and tell about what it is, but it's the overall percentage of body fat that you have that we're talking about. And that's, if it's high on the outside, it's high on the inside too. We've got a visceral fat around all of our organs, which a small amount is needed as a cushion. So things don't bounce around in there, but when it becomes excess on the outside, it's excess on the inside too. Ooh. And we're talking about hard for your,
So fat is through and through. When you've got all that fat around your heart and things like that.
Very much so.
It's not a good thing to do. JT, how do people get in touch with you if they want to figure out a diet that's right for them?
They can call the office at Nation's Best Healthcare on 77, and or they can see me on Facebook at facebook.com/jt.nutritionist.
JT.nutritionist.
Yes. Or they can call my cell direct and set an appointment at 850-276-5343.
JT Thompson, thanks so much for coming on the show and getting us smart on nutrition.
You got it, man. Thank you very much.
All right. And we'll be right back after your Mad Hatter Minute.
Hi, this is David Lovett, and this is your Mad Hatter Minute. There are three things that may make your car run: fuel, fire, and air. Today, we're going to be talking about the air and the air intake system. Early automobile intake systems were very simple air filters connected directly to the carburetors. A modern automobile intake system has three parts. It has the air filter, the mass airflow sensor, and it has the throttle body. Air enters the engine through a snorkel tube located just inside the hood. The raw, cold air comes in contact first with the air filter. A particulate air filter is a device created of fibrous materials that removes the dust, debris, pollen, and bacteria from the air before moving into the engine. The filtered air then continues through the snorkel tube to where it reaches the mass airflow sensor, or commonly known as the MAF sensor, M-A-F sensor. Mass airflow information is then transferred digitally to the electronic control unit, or the brain of the vehicle, for which it tells how much air is entering the vehicle and how much fuel should be distributed in connection with the entry of the air. The throttle body controls the amount of air being distributed back into the engine. Whereas the mass airflow sensor measures the air, the throttle body actually controls the air. This in turn controls the amount of fuel ratio to be delivered back into the engine. And keeping a clean air filter, keeping a clean throttle body creates better running vehicles. I'm David Lovett, and this has been your Mad Hatter Minute.
Hey folks, this is Joshua Brown with Mad Hatter on 23rd Street. Is your check engine light on? If it is, text MADHAT28, that's MADHAT28, to 24247, and we'll check it for free.
Welcome back to the show. I'm here with Dr. Aaron Shores from Spine and Neuropain Specialists here in Panama City. And we're talking about your spine and your spinal health. And I noticed you brought a friend with you here, Mr. Bones. We'll call him for the purposes of this interview. If any of you out there have a better name for this spine over here, please let us know. What's his name? Mr. Bones, right?
Mr. Bones, that works.
All right, now, one of the most common things I think that people have problems with when they get into car wrecks is whiplash. You always hear about whiplash. And, you know, lawyers, my wife was recently rear-ended, you know, lawyers know all about whiplash. And I was amazed at the depth of knowledge that they have. Maybe you can show us, and if I can see Mr. Bones just for a minute.
Sure.
What all actually happens when you get in a car wreck? I mean, say you're riding along. This is you, and this is normal posture like that?
Yeah, that's pretty close.
Okay, so everybody's got a little curve, I guess. You're riding along, you get rear-ended, and then this fella gets whipped forward, right? Is that right?
Well, if you get rear-ended, yes, you're gonna go forward and backwards. So you're gonna get a.
You go forward and then you whip back.
You come back.
And maybe you're straightened out, or maybe you're more than straightened out.
Correct, and then you have the weight of the head actually pushing down on the joints and some of the other structures
along the back here,
in the back as well. And that acceleration, deceleration injury can cause a great deal of pain in the neck and the head and shoulders and so forth.
But it doesn't always happen right away, and that's one of the things about whiplash, is that it takes a day or two. Why is that? Sometimes longer. Sometimes a week.
You know, the exact reason for that is not always understood, but there's a few theories behind it. One is that when you get rear-ended, adrenaline kicks up, your fight or flight responses are there, so you're kind of revved up and excited, I guess, from the impact, so you're not always aware of it, and it's not until after the adrenaline calms down that you get away from the injury that you start to become more aware of the soreness. Sometimes some chemicals that are released from the impact take a day or so to really start to irritate the neck.
Sure.
So for a general whiplash injury, assuming there's no fractures or any pinched nerves or anything in the neck, it's not uncommon for that to take a day or two or so to develop. That's pretty common. You know, I went to the emergency room after the accident. I didn't feel all that bad, and then 2 days later I couldn't get out of bed. And that's quite a common presentation.
And that, and off camera, I told you about my accident years ago when I was rear-ended, and just as a precautionary measure, I went to the doc. I was still active duty, and she told me, well, you look okay, but it seems that you're going to be in pain in a few days. If you got rear-ended, you've probably got a little whiplash, because I had a little in the neck, but not a lot. And I got to tell you, she was right. A couple days later, I was in a lot of pain.
Yep.
And thankfully, it went away over time. Mm-hmm. But what I don't understand, doctor, is what does whiplash look like? I mean, is it a bruise? Is it a broken bone? Is it a twisted nerve? Is it a compressed disc? What is it?
Well, it's a good question, and there's no one test that makes the diagnosis. It's really a clinical diagnosis, but it's a constellation of symptoms that consist of neck pain, muscle spasm, muscle pain. There are some joints in the neck, which are called facet joints, which are commonly aggravated. So oftentimes patients will have an X-ray or an MRI after an accident, and it's really unremarkable, but yet they still have quite a bit of pain. So the diagnosis of whiplash is largely a clinical diagnosis once you've excluded that there are no other major structural problems with
So perhaps it's more muscular than anything else?
Oftentimes I think it's a combination of both muscular discomfort as well as a joint discomfort. There are some joints in the back of the neck called facet joints.
And those are these little things
Those
here?
are those little joints right here on the back of the neck, and they can often be a great source of pain, but they're not diagnosed by an X-ray or an imaging study. That's why it takes oftentimes an expert in treating whiplash to effectively alleviate those symptoms.
Wow. So what would be the treatment for something like this?
Well, conservative treatment is always the best. I'm a big believer in do the least amount possible. But assuming that there are no major structural damages, physical therapy, behavioral modification, anti-inflammatories, muscle relaxers are probably a first step. If that doesn't work, then there are some injections that can be done to help alleviate the muscle pain or to address those facet joints there in the back as well, to try to alleviate the symptoms more long term.
I know in my particular instance, it was mostly muscle relaxers and the anti-inflammatories that got me through it, and I was fine afterwards. So if you're a young, healthy person, it'd probably be all right.
Yeah, I mean, it just depends. Everybody's a little bit different, but it certainly can be very uncomfortable for folks, and everybody responds a little bit differently.
Dr. Aaron Shores, thanks for getting us smart on the whiplash and bringing Mr. Bones in today.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
All right, be careful driving out there. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the show. I have a friend of the show here, Thomas Winterman. He's a published author and a certified
clinical counselor.
I always get that wrong. I'm so sorry, Thomas. But what's our Thrive tip for the week? This wonderful book, The Thrive Life, gives you tips on how to live a good life, or a more creative life perhaps, or a more constructive life, or more rewarding life in general. And there are some tips in there that can keep us going throughout the week. So here it is Monday. What's our tip for the week that'll get us through?
For this week, it's there is no tomorrow. And I am the king of making excuses for not starting something good for me, like working out. I'll be all excited about waking up at 5 a.m. and getting started and getting it going, and this will be like a Thursday. And I'll say, I'll start Monday. Monday would be a good day to get this started because it's the start of the week, it's brand new. Then Monday rolls around, doesn't happen.
Well, I got to tell you, I'm kind of a procrastinator myself, and maybe a lot of people are. You put things off like, no big rush, we can do that later.
Yeah.
Not a good habit.
No, it's a terrible habit. Or it'll be something like, I need to get some new running shoes before I start running. Or, I don't have the armband for my iPod, so I can't listen to music while I run. I'll put it off until I get that. The more we put things off, the less likely we are to do it. So day one, the day you think about it, the day you make a plan, get started. Get started on it because, truthfully, there is no tomorrow. Because once the next day comes, it's today, and then you'll say tomorrow again.
Yeah, so there really is no tomorrow.
There is no tomorrow.
Because if you make it really easy to say that I'll do it tomorrow, tomorrow comes and you can do that again. It's just too easy for you.
If you've got the time to think about it and plan it, you've got the time to do it.
How has that helped you in your life, though? And how do you do that? If you're an undisciplined person, do you just have to find some inner strength to just suck it up?
You do, and it gives you some immediacy in your life. And the thing about exercising and working out is that tends to build positive momentum. And once you start going, your endorphins start going, your adrenaline starts moving a little bit. You find the motivation after you get started.
People talk a lot about going to the gym, but they don't actually go.
Yeah.
And I know just from personal experience, there's times when I was like, oh, geez, I have dragged myself into the gym. I didn't want to go. I was too tired, wasn't feeling right, the whole thing. But after the workout, I'm so glad I went.
Right.
You know?
Right. Nobody ever regrets a workout. 2 weeks later, you won't look back and think, well, geez, I really shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
But that cheat meal that you had, you might look
Yeah.
back a week later and think, oh, man, I am reaping what I sowed there.
So the tip of the week is there is no tomorrow.
There is no tomorrow.
There's no tomorrow. Don't procrastinate. Thomas Winterman, thanks so much for
Thank
that
you.
Thrive tip for your week, and we'll see you next time.